Hello children, how are you? And today we are going to talk about our third unit and very important theme, humans without humanity. Most probably we heard the title and we heard the saying, humans without humanity. So from the same unit, humanity, we are going to talk about a beautiful play which was written by a familiar short story and bedtime story writer, Oscar Wilde. He was very familiar for kids bedtime stories. We heard many stories which was written by Oscar Wilde. The same here is a beautiful play for you, that is the selfish gain. So let us read that. We know word selfish. When we are talking about humanity, oppositely at the same time we'll get the word selfish. Humanity means showing kindness, respecting others, maintaining good relationship with others. So that is humanity. And here the opposite word, the antonym of this humanity is selfish. So here we have a selfish giant and how he will behave and what made the play a very beautiful. Let's read and understand. Before going to that, let me read out the characters which will come in the play. Let me write on the board, then you will understand very clearly. The one is old giant. This is one more important character, and next one is the giant. Person is one, but the characters are two. We can say that split personality, dual role. When we are watching any movies, there we can see dual roles. One person will act like two. The same here person is one and the characters are two characters. Giant character, one is old giant, at the same time the giant. So the giant and the old giant refer to the same character. The giant is a self character, whereas old giant is change and kind character. So here the giant is selfish and he is kind. So both are opposite. So person is one, but the characters are two. One is old giant and second is selfish giant. So the old giant is very kind, but the giant is selfish. How they are selfish, how they were kind, in which condition, in what conditions he will behave like a kind man, in which conditions he will behave like a selfish man. So let's read out the play and understand. An old giant addresses the audience directly. The action plays out behind him as he describes it. So now our old giant, the kind giant, is addressing the audience. So he is talking to all the people. In the beginning only we discuss it is a play. It is a play. It is a part one. So it is a play. So we know the play, so means they will be on stage, they will act and they will show to the live performance. So giant was on the screen, on the stage, and he was addressing the people with his own words and he's saying all the story what happened in his life. So let's read. And Oscar Wilde, let me give a good, before going to start the play, let me give a quick introduction about Oscar Wilde, a man who was very familiar for his writings, and at the same time he was a good playwright, and especially he has shown every movies, and basically he belongs to Christian religion. So every story will related to Christianity. So every story we interlink to Christianity. So in this also we will get who is the old giant, who is the giant. So finally we will come to know what are the characters. So let's read the play and begin. Old giant. So already said it was going to explain what happened in his life. I once owned a large lovely garden with soft green grass. Here and there, over the grass stood beautiful flowers like stars, and there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into delicate blossoms of pink and pearl, and in the autumn bore rich fruit. The birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games in order to listen to them. Every afternoon, as we were coming from school, the children used to go and play in my garden. But one day I came back. I had been to visit my friend the Cornish Urge, and I had stayed with him for 7 years. After the 7 years were over, I had said all that I had to say, and I determined to return my own castle. That is not castle, the T will be silent, castle. When I arrived, I saw children were playing in my garden. Children were playing in my garden. So now let us explain about the garden. The garden was very, very beautiful. The old giant was saying that my garden was very beautiful garden. It has a beautiful flowers and beautifully it was blossoming up. And when the blossoms, what will happen? The birds will come and they will sit on the branches of my beautiful trees in my garden. And when they sat, they won't be silent. They will start on singing songs. So when they are singing songs, some children will use to play in my garden where they will stop the play. Why? Because when the birds are singing rhythmically, when the birds are singing rhymes, when the birds are singing beautifully, then immediately all the children will stop the game and they will silently, politely, quietly, they will listen to the songs of beautiful birds. That was my beautiful garden. My beautiful garden has a lovely trees and a beautiful soft grass and trees and plants and birds. And every day when the children after coming from the school, when they are going home, they will come to my garden because my garden is a big garden. Most probably you will also do same thing. After completing the school, 5 o'clock, you will go your home, you will throw your bags there and you will search for the big place to play. Yes or no? Everybody will play. Yes, I too, I did same thing. After coming from the school, I used to keep my bag there and I used to go to playground and I used to play in my childhood. The same thing here, children after completing from school, from morning to evening we will study, we will be bored and we will get restless. But after completing 5, when we come home, by seeing the ground, a beautiful place for playing, for sitting, then immediately full energy will come to us. Then immediately same like that, the small children, they came to the garden and they will play there. They will spend the time in the garden. They will enjoy the time by seeing the beautiful great plants, the beautiful garden and listening to the beautiful noise and songs which were made, sang by the beautiful birds who came to sit on the branches. And that was a beautiful situation, a beautiful life which was leading by Jane. One day he went to his friend and he stayed for 7 years. After 7 years, he came back to his home. When he came back to home, what happened? The trees were very beautifully grown up and blossom and singing songs by the birds. And at the time, the same children were playing in the garden. At the same time, another character came out. When they all were playing, when they all were beautifully enjoying the garden of the giant, old giant, immediately another person came out. Who is that? The giant. Who is the giant? Very selfish man. He came out and he's saying, "Hey, what are you doing here?" The children ran away. Immediately what happened? Another character came out from the body of the old giant. Old giant was very kind man. And when he has seen all the children were playing, when all the children were enjoying his own garden, he got selfishness. This is my garden. who are you here to play? Then immediately, hey, what are you doing here? Then immediately, when they heard the noise, sound, the big sound of the giant, they ran away from the place. Then he is saying that, the giant is saying that, my own garden is my own garden. Anyone can understand that, and I will allow nobody to play in it because but myself. The old giant points out to the younger giant working on the wall, putting up a sign and then listening at the wall. And he's saying that, what he's saying, this is my own garden. Before that, the old giant was very, very kind man, and he allowed everybody to play in the garden. But when they all others were enjoying, then immediately the selfishness came out. Yes or no? When we have something in our homes, instead of us somebody was enjoying that, what we will get? We will get jealous. We will get selfishness. This is my own property. But they were playing. Then immediately the giant came out and saying, hey, what are you doing here? This is my own garden. Everybody should know that this is my own garden. I won't allow anybody to play in my garden. Immediately all the children ran away from the bird, and some small giant is fixing something in the wall. What is letting you know that? So the old giant, so I built a high wall all around and put up notice, that is, trespassers will be prosecuted. The children, I heard the children whispering outside the wall on the other way to school. So what happened? Immediately they constructed a big wall. Big wall surrounded the garden. A big wall. They constructed a big wall around the beautiful garden. A beautiful garden. Here beautifully the trees were there, a greenery, a beautiful garden, and the birds were sitting here and listening to the beautiful noise. And it was a very, very beautiful garden. It was very, very beautiful place. Very beautiful place. But when the selfish man came out and he said, no, this is my own garden. I won't allow anybody. I want myself to play in this garden. So what he is saying that, this is my garden, I have to play. Others should leave. So immediately he constructed a big wall around it. Big wall around it, and he made a notice here, trespassers are prosecuted. Means others are not allowed to enter into the garden without permission. So immediately he kept a notice. Then immediately all the children were outside the garden. Here the children were standing and they were talking what this man did. Beautifully we are playing here, we are enjoying the beautiness of the trees, we are enjoying the beautiful climate, we are enjoying the songs of the birds. Then now what happened to this giant? He constructed a big wall. So they are whispering from the side of the wall. For example, mostly you know that this very well. During the holidays we used to play some other games in some others' compounds. So when we are playing there, they will see one day, they won't bother. 2 days they will observe, third day, fourth day they will see. They will feel that every day this is my place and my son was not playing and others were coming and playing in my own compound. What they will do? Next day they will close the gates, they will close all the compound wall and they will make everything. Yes or no? They won't allow others to play in the garden. Same thing here. The giant also did the same thing. What is in the gain? Immediately he constructed a big wall around the garden and he kept a notice, trespassers, means others are not allowed without permission. Immediately the children were very, very much disappointed. They thought that they will play every day, but when they are returning from the school, they have seen a big compound wall and they are whispering, when he will open the gate, when we will go inside, when we will play. So they are whispering beside the wall, so everybody is hearing that noise. Next, so the characters, small children's characters, the tall girl, one tall girl was saying that, now where we know where to play. Where we have to play now? The garden was being closed, constructed by, surrounded by a big compound wall. We can't jump the wall and we can't cross the gate. How we can play? Where we can play? Said a tall girl. Then immediately a short boy saying that we can play on the road. Next another girl, square girl, saying that but the road is very dusty. Graceful girl, all full of hard stones. Round boy said that I don't like it. Let's walk around the wall when our lessons are over. At least we can talk about the beautiful garden inside. So now what these girls were discussing, children were discussing. So now where we can play? The garden was surrounded by a big wall, and he kept a notice not to come inside. Where we can play, where we have to play. Then one girl said that we can play on the road. Somebody said that no, the road was fully dusty and the road is full of pebbles. If we fall on the road, we will get injury. So where we have to play? So before that, they have a beautiful place. Before that, they have a beautiful garden. Before that, they have a beautiful place. But now they have no place to play. And they're saying that on the road, but road is not good. The road is dusty and the road is full of pebbles. So where we have to play? Then immediately one girl said that no problem. At least instead of playing that, we will walk around the compound wall and we can discuss what is inside the garden. Yes or no? So the girl said, okay, let us walk around the compound wall and discuss what is inside the garden. How was the trees? How was the beautiful sounds? How was the grass? So let us discuss about the about the garden, and at least we can enjoy ourselves by talking about the garden. So let's, another girl now, happy we were there. Round boy, he is very, very selfish Jane. The Jane opens the door in the wall and shouts at the children, my own garden is my own garden. Anyone can understand that, and I will allow nobody to play in it but myself. The children scattered. Immediately they said, what they said? At least we will walk around the compound. When they are walking around the compound, again the giant came. Giant character is selfish man. He came and he opened the gate and said, hey children, what are you doing around my garden? This is my garden, my own garden. Anyone can understand that I won't allow nobody to play in it. Then immediately the children scatter, means they were separated and they left. Next, the giant, old giant. Then the spring came all over the country. There were little blossoms and little birds. Only in my garden, it was still winter. The birds didn't come to sing and the trees forgot to blossom. The people who were pleased best for the snow and frost. What happened, you know? The old giant came now, the kind man came, selfish giant character went off, and the kind giant came and was thinking that, what happened to my garden? My garden, outside of my garden, everyone got spring, but my garden is still winter. What happened to my garden? It is fully snowy. It is full of frost. It was fully covered by snow. Other side, other gardens, other places except my garden, all were spring, and they got little blossoms, and they got beautifully, again, little birds coming to the spring, and they are enjoying outside. What happened to my garden? My garden is not getting spring. It is fully still in winter season. What happened to my garden? What happened to my garden? So the old giant was worrying about the garden. Why? Because the garden is still in winter season. Outside it is spring, but inside it is winter. So all the trees were covered with snow, and there was no blossom, and there was no flowers, and there was no greenery. Everything was covered with snow, and his house was also fully snowy. It was totally covered. Then immediately the snow and frost saying that spring has forgotten this garden, so now we can live here all year round. What the spring winter season, the snow was saying here, you know, Maybe the spring forgotten to come here. So the spring left this garden, and outside it was spring, but inside the garden it was snow and frost. The snow and frost is saying that maybe the spring has forgotten here. So this year long we can enjoy. For example, now we are, for example, in the school, when you are in the school, the bell rang. So some teacher has to come in the class, but the teacher was not coming to the class. They were late. What do you think? Oh, the teacher was absent today. So we can enjoy all period. Yes or no? We will enjoy or no? Yes or no? Same thing here. The snow and frost was thinking same thing. What the snow and frost was thinking, maybe the spring has forgotten to come to this garden. So let us enjoy this all year in the garden. So nobody will come to us. We can grow more. We can be here for a long time. So snow and frost was saying that we can be here for a long time. At the time, old Jane, the kind man, was talking like this. The snow covered up to the grass with their great white cloak, and the frost painted all the trees silver. Then they invited the north wind to stay with them. When he came, he has wrapped in heavy furs. He rode all the day about the garden and rejoiced in blowing the chimney pots over. What happened, finally the snow and frost was staying here. The old giant was worrying, what happened to my garden? All outside it was spring, but in my garden it was still winter. How can I stay here? The snow was covered up to the trees, and my house was totally covered with snow. So where I have to stay? Not only the snow and frost, the snow and frost invited another friend, north wind. The north wind came here and staying here and disturbing everything and moving all the things here and there. There was no settlement, there was no silence in the house. It was fully disturbance in the garden. My house was totally disturbed. So he was worrying. Who was worrying? Old giant was worrying. Why? Because he was very, very kind man. But the giant was very, very happy because children was not playing in the garden. So let's see. North wind saying this. This is a delightful spot. We must ask the hail to come on a visit. So old giant came. So the whole old hail came every day for 3 hours. He rattled on the roof of a castle till he broke most of his slates, and then he ran round and round the garden as fast as he could do. He was dressed in grey, and breath his was like ice. I sat at the window and looked out my cold white garden. Now what happened? The old giant invited the north wind. So north wind came and trying to remove the white spot, that means the ice. So it is coming to clear up everything. So it was saying that this was a very delightful spot. Immediately the hail came and rattled over the place and trying to clear everything and making everything clear. So the giant was looking at the window and thinking that how is my garden? Previously it was very greenery. Previously it was very beautiful. Previously it was full of blossoms. Previously it was full of children playing under the garden. Previously many birds were here. Now no birds, no children, no greenery. Now it was everything is white in color. So the giant was very, very worried about the garden, and he was looking when the hail was clearing up everything. He opened the window and he is looking through the window how the garden was. The giant, I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming. I hope there will be change in the weather. But the spring never come, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but my garden she gave none. The autumn was saying that he is too selfish. So it was always winter here, and the north wind and the hail and the frost and the snow danced about through the trees. So now what happened, the garden is still winter. Winter means full snow. So the garden is fully covered with snow. No spring season, no summer season, no rainy season, no other seasons here. The garden is fully covered with ice, snow. So the selfish giant was worrying. What he's saying that, what happened to this season? Why the spring is not coming to my garden? The giant was saying that, what happened to the spring? This dirty spring is not coming to my garden. Why it was so late to me? Already is completed, and other gardens having all the seasons, but not my garden. The old giant, very kind man, was crying that all the seasons, all the gardens were enjoying all the seasons, but my own garden having a big trouble, that is always having winter season. So now children, what is the condition of the old giant? The giant is saying that the seasons were not starting, not coming to my garden. The old giant was worrying, what happened to my garden? My garden was still in the problem. I'm having a big problem. Why? Because there were no beautiful trees. There were no beautiful greenery. There were no birds. Total covered with snow. Totally covered with snow. Everything is full of snow. And along with snow and frost, the north wind came, the hail came. All were in the garden itself. So there was no spring season. There were no summer season. There were no rainy season. So the garden of the giant is only having winter season. So the giant was very, very bothered and saying that, Autumn was saying that he is very selfish. Why? Because he is not allowing anybody to the garden. So why we have to come? So let me conclude the first part of the selfish giant and saying that, let me ask you a question, that why the winter was not leaving the garden? The question is, why the winter was not leaving the garden, and why other seasons were in the outside of the garden? Very simple, you know that. Maybe you are guessing the answer. Very simple. Yes, what you thought, that was correct. What you know that? When the children left the garden, when the giant said, this is my own garden, I won't allow anybody to play in my garden. When he said the dialogue, when he sent the children out of the garden, what happened? What happened? The seasons were stopped in the garden. The seasons were not entering into the garden. So the garden was fully snow. So this is the condition. This was the condition. So when the children were not in the garden, when the giant is not allowed the children into play in the garden, what happened? The garden is full of snow. The garden is fully disturbed. There was no beauty in the garden. There was no grace in the garden. There was no happiness in the garden. There was no happiness in the garden. Why? Because there was no children in the garden. There were no playing in the garden. There were no playing of the children. So the garden has been abandoned by all the seasons. So the garden was dried. The giant was worrying, what happened to my garden? What happened to my garden? Why other seasons were not coming to my garden? So this is the end of part 1. Let me conclude this part 1. Let me remember all the story here. So the 2 characters, but only 1 person. The giant will act like 2 persons. One is selfish and the giant. So old giant was very kind man and the giant was very selfish. So what happened one day? Every day children used to play in the garden. The garden was very, very beautiful, right? The garden was very beautiful. The garden was very, very blossom. The trees were fully grown up. The tree was very beautiful, and green grass and beautiful flowers were there, and the birds were coming and taking the honey, and the birds were there and they were taking and sitting on the branches of the trees and beautifully singing on the trees. By the songs, children every day after the school, every day they used to come to the garden and they used to play in the garden. But one day, after 7 years, the giant went to visit his friend. After 7 years, he came back to home and he has seen that the garden was very, very beautiful. He saw the beautiful garden and he thought, yes. When he saw the beautiful, and he said that this is my garden. When the word came my, it is a word selfish. Never say I or my, always say ours. So because we are not the permanent in the world, so all the world is ours, not anybody's property. So here the giant came to after 7 years, and he has seen the garden. The garden was very, very beautiful, and he said, oh, my garden was very, very beautiful. It is full of beautiful flowers and beautiful garden. All the birds were coming and sitting in the garden and making a beautiful, singing a beautiful song. So my garden was very, very beautiful. He thought, when he saw the children were playing in the garden, he said, hey children, why are you playing here? Why are you here? Go from here. Then immediately all the children went out. When the children went, they were very, very disappointed, and they were searching for the place to play, and they thought there was no good place to play, and they were moving around the compound wall. And the giant constructed a compound wall, and he said, what he said? Trespassers are prosecuted, means who are coming without permission, they will be questioned, they will be commanded. So the gates were closed, and the garden was fully constructed by surrounded by a big compound wall. The children were upset. When the children left the place, immediately what happened in the garden? There were no other seasons. The garden is fully with snow. Only winter, outside spring, but inside winter. Outside rainy, it was winter. Outside summer, but it was winter. So the giant was very, very disappointed, and the old giant was saying that, what happened to my garden? Outside all the spring, all the rainy season, and all the summer was going everything beautifully, but what happened to my garden? What happened to my garden? So the giant was worried about the condition of his own garden. So now the old giant was worrying, and the selfish giant was thinking about the garden, how to solve the condition. So that is the end of our part 1, selfish giant. So let me remember and let me talk about the second part in the coming class. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Meet in the next class. Until then, bye bye.